Welcome back to the show. To say I'm pretty excited about this week's guest would be an understatement. My guest on the show today is someone that I've looked up to in the area of workplace health promotion for a long, long time. So to get the opportunity to speak with them was a real honor. I'm going to read out just a portion of his CV to set the scene, because if I read out the whole thing, it would take at least an hour. Professor Sir Cary Cooper, CBE, is the 50th anniversary Professor of Organisational Psychology and Health at the Alliance Manchester Business School. He is also the President of the CIPD, President of Institute of Welfare, and past Chair of the Academy of Social Sciences, past President of the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy, and the British Academy of Management. He is the author, editor of over 250 books, over 450 scholarly articles, and a regular contributor to radio and TV. If that wasn't enough, he was knighted by the Queen in 2014 for his contribution to the social sciences. As impressive as Sir Cary's CV is, I can honestly say he's the most humble, the most genuine person that you will come across. He's a force of nature when it comes to health promotion and workplace well-being. And at the same time, he's just so easy to converse with, to get along with. Since recording, actually, Cary asked me to speak with the UK's National Forum for Health and Wellbeing at Work, which is such a privilege. Cary continues to challenge organisations to do more to protect and promote the health and well-being of their people, and you'll hear that in our conversation. Sit back and be inspired by this chat with Professor Sir Cary Cooper. Sir Cary Cooper, hello and welcome to the Work Well podcast.
Yeah, I'm very privileged to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, I'm extremely privileged to welcome you onto the show, Cary. So you've had a really, interesting, distinguished career. I don't know if it's possible to share with us some of the highlights or maybe some of the interesting projects you've worked on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I started this, as you can hear from my funny accent, I'm not exactly a Mancunian. I come from, I was actually born and raised in West Hollywood in LA. And I guess my career effectively, funny enough, started while I was a student, because we didn't get grants or anything like you get in Europe. And I had to work. I came from a working class background. But one of the jobs I had while I was doing my MBA at UCLA was being a social worker in the city of Los Angeles. And before that, I thought I was going to end up being a tax lawyer or something like that. All my friends became lawyers or, accountants or whatever. And then when I saw the deprivation I saw in LA, particularly with the Black community where I was a social worker, and in the middle of LA itself, the city of LA, where I was dealing with the homeless, that was my two client bases. And I learned so much because I was doing that as a job so I could go to university, pay for my university. And what the deprivation I saw changed me entirely. And as I was finishing my degree, I started shifting toward the behavioral sciences, toward psychology and the like, and basically ended up coming to the UK because there was a visiting professor at UCLA while I was doing my master's degree, and he invited me over for the year. And next thing I know, I'm in Leeds University, but only for a year. And then they got a grant to keep me to do a PhD and so on and so forth. As what life pushes you in various directions.
Sure.
But I must admit, the powerful thing that made me go into the area of really the well-being of employees is what I'm worried about and have been worried about, is by my experiences in the city of Watts as a social worker and seeing the deprivation I saw. And I thought, I'm a lawyer. I mean, yeah, sure, I'll probably earn big bucks, but will I make a contribution? Will I do anything worthwhile? And the workplace became a kind of logical place because we spend probably more of our waking hours in our work environment than we do in our home environment.
I know, it's unfortunate, isn't it?
It is. And so therefore, I guess I gravitated in that way became a psychologist, did a PhD in workplace psychology, and then from there, started to work in the whole area of what do we do about the workplace. And I guess it started with looking at stress at work, which was a big thing in the 1970s. And I guess I did probably one of the first studies ever in Europe. I'm that old, I can say that. I think it must have been and it was a big multinational company asked me to come and look at why senior managers weren't moving their jobs. So I went to do this study. And in doing the study, I was asking, now I'm at Manchester when this happened. I came to UMIST, University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology, which later merged with the University of Manchester. And we were talking to these senior execs of this multinational company, big one. And they would say things like, the reason I'm not moving is I don't need the stress of moving up the hierarchy anymore. I have a young family. I want to spend time with my family. So I kept hearing the word stress. So having done the work for the company, I said, would you mind if I actually looked at stress among your senior execs? And they said, no, it's fine. I said, I'd like to do that. And I got a PhD on it. And her and I did this work on managerial stress, was probably the first big study on it.
Yeah.
And we did a real in-depth thing of a lot of very senior managers in this big multinational, or a big division of this multinational. And that's how it started, I guess. Me looking at the stress levels on people, the lack of work-life balance, the long working hours, the job insecurity, stuff like that.
Yeah. So you mentioned there, so stress at work was a big deal in the 1970s. I guess, does it disappoint you then that it's still a big deal in the 2020s? Or
I know, isn't it sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But it doesn't depress me in a way, because this has been a long time coming. It was an issue in the 70s, much more an issue now, because we have techno stress. We have being on 724. We have emails at all hours of the day. We have all of that hitting us. And we have much more kind of job insecurity and stuff like that. And therefore, I think whereas in the 70s was a problem, but the way organizations were dealing with that as a problem was to, do stress management training, rather than look at the culture of the organization. Yeah. What I saw morphing over the decades, again, as I say, I'm that old. What I have seen over the decades is a movement toward seeing stress and well-being as a strategic issue for the organization. In other words, how do we change the culture rather than put on a course which tells you how to prioritize your work or express your feelings or whatever, a training thing, which is what we've always done. In other words, we're going to train you and you're going to have to change, rather than the culture of the organization changing.
Sure.
What I have now seen, and this is not just during the pandemic, this was starting before the pandemic. I should think about 5 years before the pandemic hit. Let's say, I guess the thing that motivated a much more strategic approach to employee health and well-being and organizational change as a consequence of that was the recession of 2008 to 2015. That was devastating. And organizations decided to change there and make it more strategic because they wanted to retain people and attract people, because they lost so many during the recession.
Yeah.
One HR director of a big financial services business said to me, I said, why are you guys really into well-being? You did nothing before the recession in well-being. Now in the recession, you're going haywire. You're doing all sorts of things. And why have you done that? And he said, regrettable turnover. And I said, that's interesting. What do you mean by that? I have to write a book on that. and he said, what I mean is we have lost so many people during the recession. Nearly a third of our employees have gone. We had to downsize that badly. That how do we retain the good people who are now mean and lean? How do we retain the good people we currently have? And how do we attract the new generation? And we have to change our culture. The way we manage people, the hours they work, flexible working, all of that has to now come and be strategic rather than, mindfulness at lunch. No longer bean bags, mindfulness at lunch, ping pong tables. We got to change. That started, therefore, I think the revolution came, oddly enough, during a recession. Talent retention, the big driver.
Yeah.
Then stress-related illnesses were still very high.
Mm-hmm.
Job insecurity, people working long hours, people being managed by bullying and more abusive behavior, command and control cultures. And then organizations started to say, okay, this is an organizational issue. And all of a sudden in the UK, Ireland, a number of countries, people were appointing directors of health and well-being, reporting to HR directors or chief medical officers. And we started to see, this is even before COVID hit.
Yeah.
And COVID then just accelerated some of the aspects of well-being that organizations wanted to do pre-COVID, like flexible working, for example, like the line manager, which is a very fundamental one.
Absolutely.
So I think we started to see a big change starting from the recession and then building up into a really much more strategic approach. But we have further to go. We're not there yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love everything you've said there. It feels like, and maybe I'm just speaking from the Irish perspective, I see so many well-intentioned organizations, HR leaders, well-being leaders that want to do this right. They want to do it strategically, but they're probably going about it the wrong way. They're still hovering around is it stress management, resilience, 1-hour workshops, yoga, fruit bowls, that kind of area. The intention is there, but maybe they're missing the support or the direction. And maybe they haven't put the link together with the organizational culture piece. So that's where it starts. That's the foundation. It's certainly something we tried to promote on the podcast. Perhaps you're a bit further ahead in the UK, but it certainly sounds like the strategic will is there from the companies that you're working with.
Oh, I think so. Look at most organizations go for the low hanging fruit, mm-hmm. don't they? So it's mindfulness at lunch, mental health first aid, a stress management course, resilience training. By the way, not that any of those are not useful, mm-hmm. right? So yeah. I had a PhD student that completed her PhD in a large public sector body in the UK on mental health first aid. There had been no studies. Does this work? But it's low hanging fruit. Oh yeah, let's get everybody who wants to be a mental health first aider trained, right? Easy thing to do. Let's do mindfulness at lunch. Let's do sushi at your desk, all that kind of stuff. That's all good. But by the way, the study she did showed it can be very effective, but you have to, not everybody who wants to do it should be doing it.
Absolutely.
They need to be properly trained, and many of them are not, mm-hmm. Et cetera, et cetera. And you've got to think it through when you do something like mental health first aid. Right. But you're right. A lot of companies start there, and I think it's because they don't understand how to treat this strategically. And it's funny because when I formed Robertson Cooper, which is a University of Manchester spin-off company, which we just sold in December to a bigger company who can do big investment into it now, which Fantastic. Is great. I'm still kind of associated with it, but it's my baby. They've now grown up, right? Very successful. But we started in 1999, way ahead of the trend. But when we first started, it was about stress at work.
Right.
And we weren't doing strategic stuff.
Sure.
But now we go into organizations and we work with a chief exec, HR director, and we do strategic things, or did, when I was working with them. And we made a decision about 5 years ago that instead of doing little jobs for them, like do a little bit of a well-being or stress audit, we said, we're not going to take these little jobs on. We're going to go to the org, and we may go out of business, but we're going to take it, and we were quite successful in that. We're going to be strategic. What we're going to offer them is a whole package of how we change the culture. And once we did that, we thought, it's a big risk.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to do, mindfulness at lunch. Absolutely. And training, but all of a sudden, some of the big boys came in and bought it. I mean, one of them gave us a 4-year contract,
Right.
big construction company, et cetera, and had massively good clients, global, big.
Yeah.
And it was really good. I mean, we couldn't do anything for the SMEs at that time, you know, but we were working with hospitals, you know, a lot of hospitals, government departments, local authorities, and so on. So public as well as private sector. But
that sounds great to hear, because it feels like what I'm trying to do with the WorkWell community is kind of going in that same direction, to empower the organizations themselves through education, through training, to manage, develop and measure their own well-being programs, as opposed to just outsourcing everything to, let's say, third-party providers who there is a role for to come in and provide the mindfulness sessions or whatever that may be when that's needed. But it's the leadership of the organization that understands what well-being is and how to develop their program, their own internal programming strategically.
I think, Brian, the issue is really a lot of organizations needed what Robertson Cooper provided, which was a strategy, helping them to strategy. Then you could bring people in to do, like you say, to do a mindfulness, or you can bring people in. Well, you can bring an EAP in. You think about the EAP and its role, employee assistance program role within it, because that's part of it too, but that's external providers, but that's fine. And you can then do, but you have to have a strategy, and working with the senior leadership team of organizations or a hospital or whatever you're doing, thinking about strategically over the next year or two, what are we going to do? How are we going to do that? And how do we collect the data to evaluate whether our interventions are working or not?
Yes.
So with one company, I remember I went several times to the board meeting quarterly for the first year. We do something, and then we do an intervention on something like maybe the line manager or the supply chain or something. And then we'd show them the evidence of either it worked or it didn't. And if it didn't work, you be honest. You say, you know what, we tried that, it didn't work. We discovered why it didn't work was X. So now we're going in and doing Y. And then we looked at the data again. We took it to the senior leadership team, chief exec and his immediate direct reports, all the heads of the departments, and they could see the data. And they could see that made a difference. It hit the bottom line. That hit the bottom line. That didn't do as well. However, it did retain people or did something else, you know. So, I mean, I think that's the kind of way forward. And I think we now have enough buy-in by organizations, public and private sector, that this is kind of strategic.
And how do you have that conversation with the organization who they believe themselves they're doing a really good job? Like you've touched on it, they have an EAP program, you know, an excellent program. They have the mental health first aiders, you know, and they're of the opinion that, oh, we're done. You know, we have all these great things. We're done when it comes to workplace well-being and psychological health and safety at work. How do you have that conversation with those organizations to move them to the organizational level interventions?
Well, the way I would do it, and the way I've done it in the past, is we do well-being surveys all the time with employees. In other words, employee voice, but we use a proper psychometric, which, funny enough, I developed, and that's what Robertson Cooper used. I mean, I did it and published it in the academic literature, so it's out there. We have good norms, we have sector norms, we have everything. It works, but you have to keep doing it. Hey, organizations don't stay static. They're changing all the time. So you need employee voice all the time. As an organization says, well, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to shift in this direction. Shifting in that direction will have consequences. So you need to know how the employees perceive those consequences, and also get their input on how you should change it, rather than have consultants like me, for example, or an academic like me come in and say, oh, you should be doing that. I never do that. I collect their voice by proper psychometric tool, a well-being auditing instrument. Then I go and get a small group of people in different representative samples of different groups of people and have them say, here's what we found. doing the audit. Is that right? They say, yeah, it's right. So what's the solution? I mean, you're at the coalface. I'm not at the coalface. I'm sitting in an office at Manchester Business School. You tell me what you think is the solution to this problem. They then tell you it. A number of them keep telling you that. And then you divide and you get with them to devise a strategy to deal with that as an issue. I'll give you a perfect example. We did a big well-being audit in a local authority, a big local authority in the UK. Okay. It was in trouble because 3 of the employees, social workers, and I think a teacher, 2 social workers, I can't remember exactly, had sued the local authority for stress at work through the health, using the health and safety executive guidelines in the UK, the government guidelines, and they won.
Right.
And they had to do something. They were forced to do something.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise they'd have an improvement order slapped on the whole local authority. So the HR director came and said, well, let's take a look at one group, which are social workers. So they are really in trouble. They're stressed out. We don't know exactly why. Come in and do an audit. So we did an audit. We did it of the whole local authority, incidentally. But let's just pull out the social workers. So we found they were the most stressed group. They and teachers who work for local authority. And we could identify specifically what the cause was, right? They were overloaded, et cetera, et cetera. So if you looked at that and I was an outsider going in as an academic, I'd say, okay, well, why don't you just hire in 500 more social workers and reduce the workloads of the social workers? But I didn't do that. I got a group of social workers together, several. We asked them, we found that overload. What's the problem? And they say the problem, yes, we're overloaded, but the real problem is we don't have enough senior social work managers to help us prioritize our load. And then all of a sudden the kid dies that we're supposed to be looking after. And that happened, by the way, in a number of social work departments in the UK. Kids were dying because the social worker didn't prioritize their case. And then, you know, something happened in the home environment. Okay. So they said, if you get, so I said, okay, do a plan. So the social workers themselves devised a plan to have, instead of 200 and some odd more social workers, just to hire in 20 senior social work managers who helped social workers prioritize their workload and who are the more high-risk kids or high-risk families or high-risk people, right? And then we looked at the sickness absence rates after that, and it was we reduced it massively among the social workers. And in other words, the bill went down because if you're a social worker and social workers are off ill with stress, you have to get adjuncts to come in, right? You have to get other social work staff to come in. You have to pay for them from outside. And the bill reduced 50%. Yeah. So we knew it worked, but it came from them, not me saying get 200 more social workers in. They said just have 20 some odd social work managers whose role is specifically to help social workers prioritize their work. So we don't have any situations in which I make a mistake with a case. So that gives you an example of how employee voice is very, very important.
A great example. I was going to say, so the employee voice listens to the employee voice, but also the employees themselves provided the solution. They were able to identify what the solution was, and, you know, an organizational level issue, and they provided the solution, and that was ultimately the remedy.
Absolutely. You need to do that. But the audit provides you on a regular basis with information about how employees are perceiving the organizations as it changes. And it is changing. Think about what we're going through now. Hybrid working is here. It's everywhere now. It's a part of our culture. By the way, pre-COVID, what our evidence was showing was that people wanted flexible working anyway. People who could. I mean, if you're a doctor, a nurse, a bus driver, a paste assembly line worker, you can't. You have to be at the coalface. But that's what they wanted. Yeah.
And can I ask, your audit, does that focus only on the psychosocial aspect, or is it a broader well-being?
It's very broad. It looks at your relationship with your boss, the culture, your hours of work, you know, pay, but pay is comparative pay, everything.
Sure.
that affects your job.
Yeah.
Work-life balance. Can you work flexibly or not? Do senior management care about you? Are they committed to you?
Yeah.
Da, 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 goes on and on and on. It's your view of your working environment.
Very good.
And
very
then you
good.
bring all the stuff together, and then you break it down by gender, by age, by divisions and departments, and young people, old people. You break it down every which way, and you can pinpoint the problem areas.
Yeah.
But you have to keep doing this because organizations don't stay static.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So the organizations that I've worked with, I can think of a half a dozen who now do it every year. Right? Just to find out what the hell is going on.
So they have a baseline that they can compare against then as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
They have a good baseline. They can say, oh, there was no problem there 2 years ago, but look what's going on now.
Yeah.
That's changed. And that's changed because we brought in new equipment, or we're doing it differently than we did before, and it's causing trouble. So we can pinpoint it before it gets too bad.
Well, what do you think of ISO 45003, the global standard on psychological health and well-being? Will that support the work that you're doing?
I guess it will, but in the end, to be perfectly honest with you, Brian, I think in the end, it's about having a product champion at the board,
right,
who's into this. So I created about 4 years ago, five men and women who were chief medical officers and HR directors came to see me at Manchester Business School and said, Cary, said, well-being is big for us now. And these are big organizations. We need to have a place where we can share with one another and then do things. I says, do you have time to do things? You're bloody HR directors, your chief medical officer. What are you doing? What are you talking about? I said, I'm up for it if you are. He said, let's do it. And we had 5 from 5 different sectors, 5 very senior people, C-suite people. Anyway, we said, okay, let's keep it at about a dozen. Let's try to hit a number of different sectors, maybe 15. We now have 40, but we cover every sector you can imagine. So it's organizations like Rolls-Royce, BT, BP, Microsoft, GSK, the UK Civil Service. So we had the HR director of the UK Civil Service on it. Okay, that kind of thing. The NHS executive for the health sector. So it's public and private. It's primarily private, the bulk, but there are public sector people in it as well. The BBC, organizations like that. Okay, and we meet. We have no money. They help fund a PhD student of mine who manages it 1 day a week. All right. And, but that's it. And we used to meet quarterly in the headquarters. But the interesting thing is it's about sharing. Like during the pandemic, it's been brilliant because we meet every 5 weeks during the pandemic rather than pre-pandemic. We met quarterly in a headquarters, like we'd meet at Rolls-Royce or we'd meet at BP or we'd meet somewhere like that. But now we meet regularly. And during 2 years, we met online, obviously. And all 40 were turning up, sharing what they were doing. And we then just had a book that just came out on it, Managing Health and Wellbeing During a Crisis, just came out a month ago.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And it's case studies of each of the company, of a dozen of the companies, 10, 12, a dozen of them, on what they did during the pandemic to look after the health and well-being. Very interesting.
Brilliant. And just to say that the name of this is the
National Forum for Health and Wellbeing at Work.
Yeah.
And given that mainly a lot of multinationals headquartered in London, right? We used to meet in London all the time. And like we're meeting in March at Rolls-Royce for our next meeting. And we do it hybrid now. So we'll probably have a dozen people in the room and then 30 online.
Yeah.
And and we can bring in ministers. We brought in ministers. We brought in a chief exec of a global company. We brought in, you name it, we brought people in who help us understand an issue. So for example, and this group decides what the issues are that we need help on, like the line manager, which everybody thinks is the critical issue. We have too many line managers from shop floor to top floor, Brian, who get their job as a manager based on their technical skills, not their people skills. So we need more line managers all the way up the hierarchy where there's parity between their technical and their people skills. We need them to be more EQ'd, more emotional intelligent,
very good,
more socially and interpersonally skilled. They think if we could do that in the future, recruit people where there's parity between their people and thingy skills, they will recognize when people aren't coping. They will recognize that people have unmanageable workloads, unrealistic deadlines, and the like. So the line manager is very fundamental. Then we looked at hours of work. We looked at the 4-day working week. We looked at mindfulness. Does it work in the context of the workplace? Medical first aiding and so on.
You tackle a different issue at each meeting.
Yep.
Is that how it works?
Yep. And we break up into small groups, and 5 of them say, I want to work on the line manager. Okay. 5 others say, I want to work on the email culture we have, which is killing people. That's a biggie, by the way. Another one, something in the field called techno stress. We got an expert professor coming in who's a global leading person who came in, and she told us what the evidence was. And then we came up with a small group decided, well, let's do a guidance thing for all our companies. 3-pager, good practice. Don't email people on a Friday night.
Yeah.
Saturday, don't email them at night. Don't email them during the weekend, unless it's absolutely
use the scheduler. I try and
urgent.
use the scheduler, for 8 a.m. the following day,
Yeah, and don't send it on a Friday night saying you can do it on a Monday morning. because a subordinate will do it right away over the weekend and screw their family life up. Don't CC in everybody, etc. Very simple guidelines, 3-page guidelines we put on our website, and it's there for anybody to see.
Fantastic.
And that, in other words, these guys and gals who make up the National Forum really are committed. There's a different generation of HR, chief medical officers, HR directors, and also directors of health and well-being. We're seeing more of them, and many of them some report directly to the CEO, some report to the HR director, some report to occupational health. But all of these people are making a difference and strategic, very strategic now. So
as well as the sessions, there seems to be there's an output from most sessions as well. I mean, you have the book.
We have an output. People get together as a group. So, for example, the health and safety executive are looking at the whole guidance on stress at work now. So the UK health and safety executive, the government body, are concerned to update it because it's 17 years old. So we've had the chairman of the health and safety executive talk to us, and then now we are working with them to help them. So a small group of people, I think it's 8 or 9. It's not even small. It's quite a big group of people want to help the health and safety executive think through what should be on the upgrade of the management standards on stress at work. How should we deal with it as an organization? So we do things like that and trying to make a contribution. We're not paid. We have very little money. The money comes for the thingies just to get the administration, and also pays for a PhD student. Who's helping the administration. And so it's a very worthwhile body. But these are very senior people committed to this organization, which has no status, no formal status. But people are coming to us all the time, and more organizations want to join. But we trying to keep it where we have 1 or 2 in every sector, but no more than that.
Right. Yeah, it's inspiring, and I mean, you're talking to the right person here. I kind of set up Workplace Wellbeing Ireland with perhaps the same intention. It was a community to bring people together to share and learn from each other, because I could see from my individual conversations with people and with companies, I could see there was great work going on. Also lots of questions coming up about people looking to get started, unsure of certain areas. So all of a sudden we created this forum to bring people together, initially at in-person events. It's all online now, of course. Hopefully we'll be getting back in person soon. But the whole idea is just to share that information out there, lessons learned, where can we improve? And the goal being to raise all boats. That's kind of the intention.
Yeah, exactly. And during the pandemic, luckily we had the National Forum, because during the pandemic, we were meeting very regularly, like every 5 weeks.
Yeah.
For an hour. We didn't have to travel anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were sharing. So one company would say, Fujitsu would say, who's in it, would say, we're doing this and that and the other. And oh, great. Well, then share it with everybody. And normally we brought somebody in, but we'd have a session where everybody, just a sharing session. Mm-hmm. What are you doing about managing people who are working 100% remotely? How are you dealing with that?
Yeah.
What are you doing about the mental health issues? How do you know your staff are actually coping? What are you doing about that? Because people are working from home, feeling job insecure because they're on furlough, or their jobs could go when the pandemic is over, etc. And we would then share, everybody would share, and then one organization would explain what they're doing, and 5 or 6 would say, that's wonderful. That really helps me, And so, it's proved very, very helpful as a communication vehicle too.
Yeah, because I guess quite often it's 1, 2, or a small number of people within an organization who are trying to manage these challenges. So all of a sudden now they have this much larger forum to ask these questions and to get support, which is
and they were
valuable.
and very practical. And sometimes I didn't even know, none of us knew that member was doing X, and it was a very novel X, on, say, furloughing staff, or how you're dealing with the supply chain, or how you're dealing with the line manager, or what do you think about the 4-day working week, or kind of contemporary issues that we're all facing now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I suppose Workplace Wellbeing Ireland is going really well and going from strength to strength. I did kind of half think about perhaps maybe it's time to move to set up Workplace Wellbeing UK, but it sounds like that space is already taken. So I think I'll leave that to you, Cary.
Well, we should find a link between the two of us anyway. And,
absolutely.
There's no problem. I mean, it's easy that we could get you to come on just as watch what we do. We do the same with you. Do the same
absolutely
with you.
Give you an update on what's going on in Ireland.
Yeah, we could do that, where you tell us what you're doing in Ireland.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'd be very interested in that. You and I might take that forward.
That sounds great. Absolutely love to do that.
And you could do that online.
Mm-hmm.
We're now doing the hybrid. So we last meeting we did it all online. The one before we did hybrid. The one we're doing in March is a hybrid again. Yeah, very good. Because some people want to come in, are in anyway, and want to come. And we always do it in London. We did it once in Manchester because we got Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester, the mayor of Greater Manchester, the ex-cabinet minister, brilliant guy, who's transformed Manchester entirely. We had Andy Burnham come into our meeting. We all met in Manchester. Everybody came up to Manchester. This was pre-COVID. And Andy Burnham told him what he was doing on the good employment charter that he developed in the city of Manchester. So it's very worthwhile to have links between us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of that hybrid model, I actually got a question from, he's a friend of mine, he's the head of Healthy Ireland, Tom James. He's just recently appointed, and he was touching on the Healthy Ireland being a government body for health promotion in Ireland. And he was asking about that move to hybrid. Okay, we know about the move to hybrid working. What does workplace well-being or workplace health promotion look like in a hybrid world? Have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, pre-COVID, people wanted flexible working, who could, by the way. A lot of people can't.
Yeah.
But those people have to go to the coalface are going to the coalface. But I think what it means for me is that people do want to work more flexibly. It's going to be more difficult. Therefore, the line manager becomes critical here. Mm-hmm. We need the men and women who have the social skills to manage people. Some are going to be in an office, some are not, who can recognize when people aren't coping, when they have unmanageable workloads, unrealistic deadlines, and then showing signs of stress. Because stress is still, in Ireland and in the UK, the leading cause of sickness absence, long-term sickness absence. 57% in the UK of the common mental disorders, stress, anxiety, and depression. And by the way, it's in most European countries, developed countries. I'm afraid that's it. Yeah. I think what we have to do is get the right kind of line manager. we have to do something we've never done before, is not say, let's work 2 days in the office, 3 days at home. Why? Why 3-2? Why 1-4? What you do is HR's now has to do what HR should have been doing a long time ago, is having an individual psychological contract with each employee and saying, what suits you and then what suits us, given the role you're playing. Okay, you say to me, I'll come in when I need to come in to team build with my colleagues. I need the social contact. I need to develop a new product or service. I'm not going to say it's going to be a 2+3 or 3+2 or 5, or like a big American global investment bank said, you can't work flexibly.
Oh yeah, I know.
You know the one I mean.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah,
and they'll lose. They're going to lose the Z generation.
I really think so. Yeah,
it's a dinosaur. It's a dinosaur attitude.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we need to do that. Each employee, but it's a psychological contract. It's got to be your role, given what you do, Brian. Let's say whatever your role is, you say, I would love this kind of flexible working arrangement. Right. And I say back to you as the employer, given the nature of the role you play, I need this from you. So what's our agreement?
Yeah.
And the agreement could be you do 3-2. The agreement could be you come in when you need to come in.
Yeah.
You know, and that's it. But you do need the line managers so fundamental in this, you can see going forward. So you got to get that right. It means you have to do more training with line managers until we start recruiting line managers where they have parity in their people skills and their technical skills. We don't have that in Ireland. We don't have it in the UK. We don't have it in the US. We don't have it in Europe.
Yeah. We
promote people based on their technical skill, not their people skills. And until we change that, we got temporary things we have to do, particularly training.
Yeah. It kind of, maybe there's overlap with something I kind of noticed on the Robertson Cooper's site, a quote of yours talking about, we need to nurture networks of well-being champions. And, you know, I'm a fan of this idea of well-being champions, kind of this network throughout the organization. We've spoken about the senior leaders and the importance of those individuals. What about that kind of network throughout the organization? This is kind of what you're hinting at, isn't it, really, with the line managers? How important is that, and how would one go about creating that network or nurturing that network of champions?
Well, the champions is a great idea. That's been around a while. It's been around, I should think, about 5 years. Well-being champions are great, and it's bottom up. It's people thinking the health and well-being of people is really important. I really want to get involved in this. My day job is doing X, but I also want to get involved in being a well-being champion. That's great. Yeah. It is definitely bottom up, and I think that's really healthy. If we're going to change things, though, and that's useful and helpful, and they get things moving, particularly in organizations where the senior people don't know what to do. They come up with ideas. They hear about what you're doing or what I'm doing or what the National Forum is doing, or they read one of our books or who knows what. They get an idea of the well-being. I want to do this in my organization. And because the senior people in some organizations don't know what the hell to do, they end up allowing them to do it, which is great. But ultimately, if we're to change the culture, we need somebody at the board level, a non-executive director, whose responsibility is for employee health and well-being. It might not be their full responsibility. They maybe have 2 or 3 different roles as a non-exec. A non-executive director in a public sector body or a private sector body, whose role it is to hold the organization to account by looking at labor turnover, looking at sickness absence data, looking at, employee surveys, which are showing that they're pretty bad, or well-being surveys that show that they're doing pretty bad.
Yeah.
And to hold the organization to account. And then somebody at the senior leadership team working with the chief exec MD who actually operationalize it. That we have a lot of those now. They're called directors of health and well-being. We need those people to work with the board, the non-exec board director, to change the culture. That's the only way you're going to change it. We're doing it. I mean, we've done gender equality, gender pay equality, by having somebody at the board level saying, I'm holding you as an organization accountable for the fact that the gap is getting bigger between men and women, or between ethnic minorities and the others. So, I mean, I think unless we do that, we're not going to change the culture. And we're doing that with sustainability too. So, I mean, God, if you say the most valuable resource we have is our human resource, you hear that all the time by CEOs, right? If that's the case, then why don't you have somebody on your board who's responsible for employee health and well-being?
Absolutely. I'm not seeing that fully. I'm seeing roles.
We're not seeing it fully either, incidentally.
I can only think
the UK is way behind on that.
Okay. Yeah. I know of one organization with a director level health and well-being responsibility. There's certainly roles, full-time roles emerging, which is great. A lot of part-time roles, kind of lower down the pecking order. You know, it's coming, but we're not there yet.
We have directors of health and well-being in lots of organizations now, reporting to HR director chief, but that's not board.
Sure.
That's not board level. The interesting organization in the UK that's done something on this is the NHS. Every NHS authority now has a director, a non-executive director on the board of that trust, whose responsibility is employee health and well-being. It's the only organization that's done that.
Okay. Yeah.
And hey, look at what we've just been through for 2 years. Think about the health and well-being of all the staff during a pandemic. They have done the right thing.
Yeah.
They've led the way, strangely enough, a public sector body. And it's coming with the private sector. We have drawn up, the National Forum for Health and Wellbeing has drawn up a plan, which we will publish shortly, which says the future is a non-exec director responsible for health and wellbeing, a director of health and wellbeing at the senior leadership team level to operationalize it.
Fantastic.
And we need that now if we're to be more productive and have less stress-related ill health.
That was going to be my final question. What is the future of work? Is it that the director level, board level well-being? So it looks like it is 5 years time.
Holding them, yeah. I think we'll have it quicker than 5 years.
Okay, great.
Because the companies that are my thing are thinking about it now.
Yeah.
And there was a whole group of them said, that's what we want to work on now. Let's figure out what the structure should look like. But they also then said, what are the metrics that will hold the organization accountable? And we're coming up with them as well. So the metrics would be,
fantastic.
I'm a non-exec. I would want to know, as a non-exec responsible for one of the major roles being employee health and well-being, it doesn't have to be the major role, but it's one of the major roles. I want to know about stress-related sickness, mental health-related sickness absence, labor turnover of staff. You see what I mean? Subjective measures, in other words, where employees, how do they perceive the organization? Are they committed to their health and well-being? Right? And you can do that subjective. So you have some objective measures and some subjective measures. We've got a whole list of them we're producing now.
Fantastic.
And that way the top person, the non-exec responsible for it, can go back to the board and say, hey, I'm sorry, you're not doing a good enough job here. Something's going wrong, CEO. Because, you know, you're losing good people in that area. Labor turnover is high. Stress-related, long-term stress-related mental health absence is very, very high. And that's why you hold them accountable.
And would you see that? Would that be in that individual's maybe their key KPIs, their targets?
Yes, that would be. These would be the indicators. That they should be using with the board to hold them accountable.
Sure.
That's the important thing. We do that with gender pay gap. We do that with sustainability. We do that with productivity. We do it with a whole range of issues. So why not for employee health and well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. Here. Let's hope we see that soon. Cary,
it'll be a while. It'll be a while,
but it will be.
Hopefully it will come.
Let's keep working towards it. I know you certainly will.
I will.
You're incredibly busy. Clearly, I hope you're managing to spend some time on your own well-being at present.
Yeah, my family. You know, I've got 7 grandchildren, and believe me, I spend as much time as I can with them.
Yeah. Fantastic. Listen, Cary, where's the best place for people to go to find out more about you and your work?
Well, I don't know exactly. They can always email me, and I can tell them whatever they need. I can tell them about my recent books and
Of
what
course.
Robertson Coopers have up to and have done, and let them know. But they can get on me, Cary.Cooper. You have my email.
I have that.
Cary.Cooper@manchester.ac.uk. Cary is Cary, not the Irish Cary. It's Cary Grant Cary. Cary.Cooper@manchester.ac.uk.
I'll include all those links in the
Okay, that's
show
good.
notes. And I think you've got
Feel
a book
free to
coming
email
out.
me. I don't mind.
I think you've actually got a remote workplace culture book coming out, if I'm not mistaken.
That comes out on the 8th of March.
Yeah, fantastic.
They might like organizations to take a look at managing health and well-being during a crisis, which came out last month.
Right. Okay.
And that is a great book because it's case study examples from National Forum for Health and Well-being member organizations like Microsoft, Rolls-Royce is in it, BP. You can see what we're doing, what they've done during the pandemic, and where they're going forward.
Excellent. That sounds excellent. I'll include links to all those resources on the show notes.
Okay, great.
Sir Cary Cooper, thanks so much for joining us on the Work Well podcast.
Yes, I've enjoyed it. Thanks, Brian, for inviting me.
And that's a wrap for this week. Go to workwellpodcast.com if you'd like to access the show notes for this episode. Quick favor to ask. Can you head over to iTunes or Google Play or wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe, rate, and leave a review for the Work Well podcast? It will be a huge help. So thank you. If you want to dive deeper in the area of workplace health promotion, if you want to educate yourself in this area, then make sure to check out the Work Well Institute. It's our online learning hub. It's a one-stop shop for all your workplace well-being training needs. You'll find all the details at workwellinstitute.org. By the way, the original music that you're hearing right now was composed by my good friend, Greg Clifford. Check him out at gregcliffordmusic.com. Thanks for listening right to the end. Remember to work well, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next episode.